Hello again, everybody, and welcome to the Mike Francesa podcast, part of the Bet Rivers Network. We come to you on this February program. We'll get some emails in, touch on a couple other things, get a chance to clean out these weeks, clean out all the emails, get everybody up to date. We're just about ready for the games to begin in spring training. They begin on Friday. You get one basically every day. Down there, the Florida teams, once in a while, like the Yankees and Mets are going to play this weekend. They don't go and play very often because obviously it's a little bit of a trek. One going to Tampa, the other one or coming back, of course, to go to Port St. Lucie. It's not the end of the world, but it's a trek. And you see the teams that are in your area. That's basically it. So if you're in Palm Beach, you're going to be. If you're the Cardinals, you're going to see a lot of the Marlins and the Nationals and the Astros and teams like that. And then the Mets were down the road, and it's stuff like that. So Florida is not as accessible as Arizona is. The Arizona teams are much closer in proximity to each other. It makes it easier to go play each other than the Florida teams, which is a little bit of a knock on Florida. But we're ready for some spring training baseball. We're ready for, the classic, if you want to call it that. I'm not a big believer in that stuff. I never have been. I would be diametrically opposed if I were an owner or a manager. I'd be diametrically opposed to sending key pitchers to such a situation. And I don't think it is a good way to get your players ready. I really don't. I understand what you're trying to sell. And then the most important thing was what happened in the Player Association. Now you have a new leader, a guy for them to get to know and to rally around as they go through this very important negotiation this fall. He's first got to get to each camp, bounce his way around baseball, get to each camp, bang the bell and get everybody on his side. And we'll see what kind of leader he becomes, because it's going to be a very, very key year if you're a baseball fan for that, and obviously for the Players Association, which went through quite a bit of turmoil this week with what went on with Clark. So it's an interesting time for them. It really is, and we'll see exactly what kind of leader, what kind of attitude that the new boss will have. Send your emails to Mike Francesa Podcast at gmail.com. So if you want to send some along, I got to dig them out. They're right here. All right. We get them ready. And let me also tell you that you can sign up for the Mike Francesa newsletter for your chance to enter the February newsletter contest and win a personalized message from me or a Francesa prize pack. If you haven't signed up, doesn't cost you anything. Just go to MikeFrancesAPodcast.com and sign up, and you'll get your newsletter delivered to your inbox each week. Now, I told you, even before the loss to St. John's at the Garden, which I thought was a distinct possibility. I thought UConn deserved to be favored. I thought St. John's had a good chance to win. I didn't think UConn was going to be a 1 seed. Off the loss last night to Creighton, I don't think there's any way they're a 1 seed. I don't care if they beat St. John's next week and then beat them again in the Big East tournament. I don't think that will get them a 1 seed the way the teams above them are playing. Okay. Arizona did lose twice. Their first 2 losses of the year. Michigan, which is now number 1, and Duke, I think, have clearly locked in 1 seeds. But teams like Houston, Iowa State, those teams, Arizona, of course, are. I don't think Purdue will be a 1 seed. I think those teams are more deserving. And listen, it doesn't matter if you're a 1 seed. You don't have to be a 1 seed. okay? It doesn't give you any real leg up to be a 1 seed versus, say, be a 2 seed, okay? I still think Connecticut will probably wind up, on the 2 line. They could slip if St. John's gives them a hard time in the next couple of weeks, they could slip to the 3 seed. Um, I think even if St. John's, uh, sweeps UConn, which I don't think they will. I don't think they'll win the game at UConn. I think they could beat them in the rubber match, and I do think there will be a rubber match because I think Villanova is clearly the 3rd best team, but I think there's a drop off from St. John's and UConn to Villanova, and I think there's a drop off from Villanova to everybody else. Um, uh, I believe that the highest St. John's can get is a 4. Excuse me. I think they'll be on the 4-5 line. Um, I don't think they'll be under a 5. I don't think they'll be above a 4. There's not other than playing UConn, there's nowhere in the league for them to gain any traction or to gain anything. Like, we know that you got big games this weekend, really big games this Saturday, okay? You got a couple of, monster games. You got Creighton coming in to play, St. John's off that big win, and Creighton trying to make a late run, but, I mean, they'd have to win the Big East tournament to get to the NCAA this year in this rebuilding year. He's done a nice job getting the team better. You see, Creighton's improving, which you expect from a guy who's a good coach. Marquette's improving, which you expect from a guy who's a good coach. Um, they're not going anywhere this year, but they're improving, and they're getting better as the season wears on. They play at noon on Saturday. St. John's hosts Creighton at the Garden, but you got a couple of monster games on Saturday. You have, and right now I'm just looking for the times. You have Michigan, which when their point guard is on his game, they are the best team in the country. When he's not on his game, Duke is the best team in the country. Arizona plays Houston. Houston lost a tough game to Iowa State earlier in the week. They had a 10-point lead in the second half. And Iowa State came back and won the game at home 70-67. Arizona, got beat a couple of times. And uh, a game that really, I think, pits the 2 best teams right now in the country. Michigan and Duke play in Washington, D.C. Connecticut plays Villanova on Saturday, then St. John's on Wednesday. Unfortunately, the Wednesday game, I believe, is on Peacock, which is wrong. It's not the way you want to sell the league. And then 6:30 Sunday night Saturday night on ESPN is Michigan versus Duke from Washington, D.C., which is right now, in my estimation, the 2 best teams in the country. The team that's got the most up, really, and St. John's has a lot of range in that on their best day, they can beat just about anybody, and they still have some vulnerabilities. But the team that has the biggest range from good to bad is Kansas. But I think they're gonna get to the point where they're getting quickly to the point where Peterson's gonna be a non-factor. I mean, I really believe that. I mean, it's just the stunts are just ridiculous. So I think they're better off not even thinking about him, and anything they get out of him is gravy. I mean, I really believe that's who they are. That's how the players almost have to adjust from that standpoint. But that league is just, last year the SEC was loaded. This year that league is just loaded. I mean, the Big 12 is just absolutely loaded at the top, completely loaded. Big 10 is good, but the, Big 12 is just unbelievable at the top. It really is. But the Michigan Duke game, 25-1 Michigan, 24-2 Duke. Boozer doing an incredible job for Duke. That's a great game. So some really, if you like college basketball, there are some really big. I can't tell you these games are that important. They're not. There's no way to they're great games to watch. Do they have any real value? I mean, if you're into seeding a little bit, which is overrated, but the bottom line is you just wanna see where they are, okay? It's a good time to just take a look at where these teams are as you're a couple of weeks out from the tournament. You know who your team is now. I've always had uh, a rule when I was getting ready for the NCAA tournament, which I've been I was a part of going back to 1982, which was my first tournament for CBS. I don't make a judgment on a team before February 10th. February 10th, you're a month out from the NCAA tournament. I think that it's a good time to really look at where teams are, where freshmen are, where the changes in the lineup are. It gives the team a chance to be growth. Look, St. John's right now is a very different team than they were in November. You're a very different team. See, they brought in guys who were better offensively, not great offensively. Like last night, St. John's in the second half was hideous offensively. Zuby couldn't make a shot. They missed a ton of foul shots. I didn't like a couple of the lineups late, but I understand because of what was going on defensively why he does it. They're trying to make their decisions defensively and then plug their offense in from there. Mitchell did nothing last night as far as points go. Um, I think Sellers is a critical piece, and they have to get Sellers to shoot more. You can't let him go quiet and not take any shots because he can't take a bad shot. He's the one guy on the team who cannot take a bad shot. That's how good a shooter he really is. We haven't even seen how good a shooter he really is. My understanding in practice, he puts on displays. It has not translated into the games. If you watch him, he's got a really good jump shot, and he's got a really good release, terrific form. He should be a much more prolific scorer than he is. Much more. But St. John's won that game with their defense, and Marquette doesn't know how to close, and they don't have enough players yet. You saw what happens when St. John's gets a guard that they can't handle off the dribble, and you saw that last night again. It hurts them, and they struggled in the second half. And if Marquette hadn't been so bad down the stretch, and give Zuby credit because Zuby did change a bunch of shots in the second half. Defensively, he did a good job. Offensively, he was bad. Offensively, in the second half, St. John's was terrible. St. John's had a good run in the last 5 minutes of the first half to open up the 9-point lead with their offense. They hit some threes, and when St. John's hits threes, when they get up around 35-40% from three, forget 50%. If they get up 35-40% from three, they're almost unbeatable because of their size and their defensive play. You see, what they've done is they've taken the players, and give Pitino credit for this. He's taken the players that have some offensive ability and tried to turn them into defensive players. The one he hasn't been able to do it yet with is Jackson, who still has Pitino pulling his hair out. He'll throw a terrible pass and he'll yank him out of the game. He'll get beat off the dribble and not box out and he'll yank him out of the game. It's got to come a point where he's got to stop yanking him out of the game because at times they need his offense, but they need Sellers' offense more. That is critical. And, Zuby, for the player that everyone talks that he is, there's too many games where he's terrible offensively. And I'm not trying to knock him. I think he's a great kid. I think he's improved a lot. I think his passing is better. His defense is good. He's very active. He's a great kid to coach. I understand all that. I think he's the wrong size for the pros. I really do. His game is completely inside, and at his size, he's going to get overwhelmed. At his size, you gotta play away from the basket in the NBA. It's just the guys he goes up against guys who are 7'4". There's nothing he could do. Alright, let's get to the emails. As I said, you can send your questions, comments, whatever, to Mike Francesa Podcast at gmail.com. We'll get to as many as we can. We'll see what's on your mind as we get ready to open up spring training and move closer to the conference tournaments and to the obviously the NCAA tournament, which begins on, I believe, the playing games. I think are on the whatever that Tuesday is. I think the Tuesday's the 15th. I think the tournament starts on the 17th. I think the playing games are on the 15th. Top of my head, I believe that's right. So let me get to those emails, and away we go. Okay, Todd starts us off in regards to the WBC. Okay, I can't stand the WBC. All right, assuming that the Mets are going to have a strict schedule with potential with their future ace Nolan McLean, such as a pitch count and innings pitched, etc. Why in the world would they let him pitch in a meaningless tournament? Well, I haven't heard them say exactly what they're. And listen, this guy McLean is he was phenomenal last year. McLean it was just tremendous last year. Right? He's got obviously an incredible array of pitches. He's got a lot of talent. He pitched brilliantly for the Mets in the innings he pitched last year. He's still eligible to be Rookie of the Year this year, if that matters to you. He's got a top of the chart spin rate. He's got a great sweeper. He's got a lot of makeup. He's got a lot of talent. He's got versatility. He's getting better against the lefties. All the things you like. He has a chance. Nolan has a chance to be a star. I mean, a big star. Now, bringing these pitchers along is very tricky. Developing them, getting them to their potential, and keeping them healthy. I think his high is 113 innings is his all-time high. That's something you got to pay attention to. I would not allow him to pitch in the WBC. If it were me, he's not going near the WBC. Listen, you want to send Holmes there, fine. Ryan wants to go there from Minnesota, fine. Even Skeens wants to go there. These guys are at the top of their development. They're at the top of their profession. They understand who they are. They understand where their arm is. They understand how to get ready. They know how to bring themselves along in the spring. Those guys are not going to put themselves in danger in these competitions. A young guy can. So I would not pitch him in that competition. He would be absolutely never leaving Fort St. Lucie under any circumstances. I know it's an honor. I understand that. You're showcasing him. I wouldn't let him go anywhere near it. David, from a strictly offensive production perspective, would you rather have Juan Soto or Manny Ramirez? Am I talking about one game? Am I talking about one at bat? Am I talking about career? What am I talking about? I would rather have Manny Ramirez. Chris, now another one of these if-was. Who are you taking for your shortstop in their prime? Jose Reyes, Francisco Lindor. Lindor, the power part of Lindor's game makes a difference. Reyes is a really good player, but the power part of Lindor's game, I think, makes a difference. Mike, bigger New York sports icon, Mickey Mantle or Joe Namath? Who was more popular at the height of their respective careers? It's not a good comparison. Mantle was as popular an athlete as we've had in New York, or anywhere, as a matter of fact. I think he might be in his prime, or in the later stages of his career, as popular as any baseball player has ever been. Mantle was a better player than Namath was for his given sport. He accomplished more. But understand this, the difference was Mickey Mantle was a sports hero. Joe Namath was one of the 2 modern athletes who wiped out the line between sports and modern culture. He made the transformation from sports hero to cultural icon. Namath was almost bigger than his sport, but he became kind of a cultural figure. The other was Muhammad Ali. That was a time where sports replaced Hollywood as the celebrities that America cared about. America cared about movie stars. They cared in the 50s, they cared about no, they cared about baseball players. They loved they, you know, they deified Ted Williams in Boston. They worshiped Joe DiMaggio. A lot of people call Joe DiMaggio the last American hero because of the era of Joe DiMaggio was the last of the print heroes. Mantle was the first of the TV heroes. Um, they were baseball stars. Namath was a cultural icon. Namath was covered not just in Sport Magazine and Sports Illustrated, he was covered in Life Magazine. He was with his fur coat and his Fu Manchu and his lifestyle and everything else. That was where sports changed. That's where the modern professional athlete became the cultural icon in America, moving away from Hollywood. In the 50s, it was Elvis, Marilyn Monroe, JFK. And in sports, it was Mickey Mantle. But as you came to the 60s, it became more cultural and very much countercultural. Ali, Namath. So they're very different. Namath's scope was wider. Men, little boys, worship Mantle. The girls were after Namath. That was the difference. It was a completely different feeling. But Namath drove a league. The NFL's popularity and growth, Namath was a big part of that. He was a matinee idol. He was at times bigger than the game. I mean, if you ever went to a game and saw him when he first would come out of the tunnel with the white shoes and the whole thing, the place would go insane. It was like the Beatles. It was crazy. I mean, and that's the difference. So it's very, very different. Richard, as a lifelong 51-year-old Met fan, okay, I've never felt more disillusioned with the team I'm rooting for, as this year's roster feels more like a David Stearns algorithm than a real baseball team. Can you remember a New York team that tore its decent tenured players away as abruptly as the Mets did? And can you talk me off the cliff? Yeah, first I can talk you off the cliff. Last year's team was not any good. Not only did they have some issues in the clubhouse, which we've alluded to, they played badly. They were bad defensively. They didn't score runs when they needed to, and they couldn't pitch a damn down the stretch. They were a bad team. Now, here's what I will say about what Stearns has done. Stearns has built a fascinating team that I think could be set up for anything from abject failure to real success because there's a real wide gap in the level of performance that he's asking from certain guys. Asking him to play positions they haven't played before, asking him to play positions they've never played before, moving guys into different spots, bringing a lot of new faces to New York, but bringing a different type of player to New York. The Mets have gamers now. They put in some gamers. They didn't have gamers. Listen, I think Alonso was really underrated. He played every day. He gave you everything he had at first base. He got big hits, and he was consistent as hell, and he liked being here. The other guys they got rid of, except for Diaz, I didn't really worry about that much. Now, there's a lot of they are gonna count on some youth. That's always tough to figure in a given year. They are gonna count on some guys doing things they haven't done recently. They're gonna count on some guys bouncing back like the center fielder. I don't trust the center fielder as an offensive player. Now, do I think I can get 260 and 20 homers out of him? Yeah. And probably good defense? Yeah, I think I can get that. You know, he has had years where if you go back a couple of years, he had 35 doubles and 30 something homers in the season and 90 RBI, 90 runs scored and 90 RBIs. That's a good year. If he gave that, that's a great year. He's fallen off a cliff since then, though. And plus, he doesn't walk. His on base percentage is under 3. I mean, he hits 250 and he doesn't walk at all. I mean, this guy has 40 walks and, 170 strikeouts. He is the complete antithesis of Soto. But I like a lot of the moves they made. The one thing I don't like was that they lost Diaz. I thought they needed to keep Diaz. They're asking some young guys to really step up. I think it's a fascinating team. I really do. I think it's I think there's a lot of interesting parts. I think they still first of all, I would not give up on Vientos in any way. I think they're making a big mistake by they have not really counted Vientos in their plans. I think that's a big mistake. Do I think Vientos is really a DH? I do. But I think he can be a big, big power hitter. The guy I saw in the postseason 2 years ago taking really good pitches out of the ballpark, you know what? I was impressed. And last year, he pressed all year, and he still drove the baseball. He just had a really bad start, and he tried to catch up, and then you get to a point where you realize you can't get to where you want to get this year, and you're very disappointed, and that's where the old Joe Torre speech is so important. But for that to matter, your team has to be in a pennant race, and his wasn't. But I think they're gonna surprise you. I really do. Now, do I think they're complete? Absolutely not. Do I think they'll have to make changes? I do. Do I think they'll have to make trades? Yes. Do I think they still need a big bat? I do. I think they need a bona fide veteran RBI man. They obviously can play him in right field because I don't think the kid's going to be an everyday player. I think he's going to start the year probably in AAA. Um, they're not going to impress you by name, but I think they're going to be better than the sum of the parts. And they're going to have some pitching, which last year Stearns left himself completely empty in the pitching department. What he came down the stretch with was an embarrassment. He can't do that again. That was a disaster. Robert, does restructuring Mahomes' contract give Kansas City enough financial flexibility to remain competitive this season? I told you this a bunch of times. This adds to it, but I don't think they can fill all the holes and get rid of the guys who are old in one fell swoop and win enough games to be a playoff team. And I think they're gonna try to be a playoff team, and I think that's the mistake. I think they needed to take a year. Now, would I bring Tyreek Hill back? I would if he would come for cheap, but if he wants a ton of money, I'm not giving it to him. If he wants to vindicate his career, if winning and vindicating his career and becoming a big player again in this league is important to him, then let him prove it. I'm not paying him for the way I'm not paying him for the look. I hear Kelsey's coming back. I don't think that's a good thing. I think they should part ways with Kelsey. I think when you keep your guys a year too long and you're sentimental about it, you lose. I've seen that happen to the Steelers. I've seen it happen to the Cowboys. I've seen it happen time and time again. Guys can't coaches can't get rid of guys that have won for them, and Andy's got a bunch of those. And I don't think Kelsey has another year left in him. Rice is a key guy for them. Worthy will help them. Rice is a key guy for them, but Rice has too much baggage to trust. But the biggest key with them is obviously whether Mahomes is healthy, number 1. Number 2, they have to completely rebuild the offensive line. And that's very difficult to do. I don't think they have to get a big running back. There's a lot of talk of them getting the Notre Dame back. I don't think first of all, I don't think he'll be on the board when they pick. They'd have to trade up to get him. Secondly, I don't think they need to have a back like that. That's a home run back. I don't think they need a home run back. They've never needed a home run back. They need a guy who can run hard, get 4th and 1s, and catch the ball out of the backfield. That's what's important to them. They don't need a guy getting 180 or 200 yards. They don't need that. And they're not gonna build their team around that. Because their offensive line's job is gonna be to protect Mahomes. What is your opinion of Billy Martin, first as a player and second as a manager? Billy was a very unique individual. As you know, he was Casey Stengle's boy. Billy was a fiery competitor who was very good in the clutch. He was one of those guys you talk about the guy who can, do nothing all year and come up with big hits in the postseason, that's Billy Martin. That's Billy Martin to a T. He was a winner. Number 2, he was a terrific baseball guy. Now, the problem with Billy Martin was it was always Billy's way or the highway. He was always looking for a fight, and too often he was looking for a drink. His drinking hurt him, especially later in his career. But there was a time where he was he was a manager that made a difference. See, there's managers like Francona is a manager that makes a difference. He changes teams, he changes clubhouses, he changes the way teams operate. He's worth wins. Billy was worth wins, but he usually wore out his welcome. But did he improve teams immediately? Absolutely. Was he a gifted manager? Extremely. Was he a troubled human being? Extremely. Was he his own worst enemy at the end? Absolutely. But not a great player, a pepper pot, fiery competitor, a winner. The kind of guy you want to have on a good team. A guy like Billy Martin, you put him on a bad team, he makes no difference. You put him on a good team, he makes a difference. and players loved him. Mickey Mantle loved Billy Martin. Didn't like, loved Billy Martin. And Billy Martin was a tremendous manager, especially when his head was screwed on right. When it wasn't screwed on right, things got a little embarrassing. But was he good? Yeah. Now, what George did with him was really wrong. Really wrong. He utilized them for box office. He utilized them to fill the stadium. He played to Billy's worst nature. Uh, it, w- eh, they were actually toxic for each other. They were a great show, but they were toxic for each other. They really were. There's no other way to put it. You know, I, I as a lifelong Yankee fan and a Yankee fan who grew up after Billy was already gone as a player and who grew up, in the early 60s and was pre Steinbrenner and pre Reggie and pre Billy coming back as a manager. I detested the Billy Reggie George thing. Hated it. Hated it. Hated every part of it. And sometimes it was Circus Maximus, is what it was. It really was. We'll see you later.